I have a wonderful electronic invention I want you to see.
It looks something like this.
Welcome to the CTO Studio. I'm your host, Etienne de Bruin. The CTO Studio is where we chat with CTOs building amazing products with incredible teams. Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Matt Ferguson?
Hello.
CTO at Zeeto. .io.
.io.
So you are the CTO of a digital marketing, or an advertising platform?
Well, we are in the ad tech space, digital marketing. We like to think of it as a bidding platform to place advertising. So both advertisers and publishers are able to sign up, and if you want to advertise on a publisher, then you can. But most importantly is you're not advertising on a publisher that might have an interest like you would normally with AdSense or something. You're really looking for a type of individual, and then we're going to ask questions, and that asking of questions is how we target. So we don't assume just because you're on a particular website you might like cars or you like to travel. That might get you a more of a demographic. And in our case, we ask specific questions, which who knew people would answer questions, but they do, and they engage. And it's just a fascinating, the statistics around it are all fascinating. The math of what we do is fascinating. So we're the only company doing it at this time. I think it's a great niche and maybe the start of something really big.
So as a publisher, I would embed a piece of code that would then display a questions interface or some sort of...
That's exactly right. You would place the ad tag, which is just a piece of JavaScript. And then once that's running on your page, that piece of real estate is going to enable us to ask questions, get the answers. And a question might be, are you planning to travel this year? Are you planning to sell your house? Very targeted.
So I'm on a travel site.
Or you might be on a Publishers Clearinghouse's site or whatever.
And so the interesting thing is, why are people answering these questions?
It's amazing. Part of it is just the web and the way the web works and the psychology of the web, where there are, folks are out there surfing, and when they see a question, they answer it. And, to many of us, maybe that's not intuitive that they would, but they do.
I years ago created a music website, Musicians Classifieds website. And one of the ways that I would allow for you to be featured was if you would answer 3 questions about your city. So we were trying to get the, what's the top music venue that you would recommend? What is one thing that people should visit or do in your city? And, we kind of as an afterthought added those questions as a way to, you either paid like $20 to feature your ad or you answered those questions. And oh my goodness, the number of answers we got was overwhelming. We actually to this day haven't, I think, effectively used the answers to those questions.
I heard a great discussion the other day about someone's father, debating with his friend about their interactions with I think it was their Alexa device that they each had at their house. So we're talking both 65-year-old men that have now befriended their Alexa and are having conversations with it and are debating whose Alexa is smarter. And, people are going to have relationships with technology that we've never considered. And I think the questions are just a simple version of that we stumbled on.
So as far as the revenue model, a publisher places the ad tag on their site. So do they get paid based on someone completing X number of questions, or
the advertising campaigns that are placed, right, are who are going to pay that publisher. And so we are collecting money from the advertisers and paying the publisher and taking our small rev share.
So a multi-platform, sort of a multi-sided platform.
Multi-sided, absolutely. The advertiser, the publisher, and then us in the middle, joining them together. Absolutely.
So maybe talk a little bit. I want to get into how you became the CTO of Zeeto. But while we're on the topic of the actual tech and the product, can you give me a bit of a breakdown on the technologies you're using? You have like a UX challenge, you have, or UI, I suppose. You have a data collection challenge. You have real-time processing, I suppose.
So it's a platform that was. Okay.
The record reflected there was neither Matt nor I that made that sound.
I can't reach my neck with my foot. So good job, boy. All right. So it's an interesting problem because when I joined the team, the platform had been written before in PHP and was quite successful, building a multi-million-dollar a year business. But we decided, and the reason I came on board was to help reinvent the tech to make it more scalable, so that the company could go big. And so
what were just on that point? What were some of the bottlenecks / ceilings that they had reached at that point? Was it flexibility, new features, scale?
Adding new features or adding new ad types was a challenge.
It became harder because of the data modeling and all that.
Absolutely, the modeling, just not quite flexible enough. It was not multi-tenant, so standing up more servers, more databases for each new tenant, for each new customer. So those things, and then just the cost implications of all of that were too high. So we knew that we could get to a platform that was probably, for what we were doing with a modern architecture, could probably run at 1/10 the cost, and be multi-tenant and be more scalable. So we went out and tried to do that. So the nice thing we did was, I assembled my team in an offsite for 3 days. We went through a decision process of laying out a fundamental architecture and then making platform technology choices through a matrix analysis of what it was in the market, what was very conservative, what was too cutting edge, and just getting the team to agree on, the boundaries so that there weren't opinions or hurt feelings. And it was a very, democratic process, but a very transparent process for everybody to have input and to see why we made the decisions. We didn't want people to step in 6 months and say, well, it would have worked if we would have used X. They all knew how the decision was made, what the criteria were for making the choice. So we ended up with, we wanted to have an event or microservices architecture, with Java was selected as for the services, the API layer of the services.
And that was a team decision?
Team decision. We talked about lots of things, including, everything from Go and, C and the whole thing. What was the right compromise? We ended up with Kafka to tie all of our microservices together. Many, many topics. We ended up with DCOS and Mesosphere. And, these are all things, if you made a decision today, what would you use, going forward? And, some of these things like, maybe you'd pick the next thing because some of these things are evolving so fast. But good choices at the time and are still, they're still okay. We ended up with, React and Redux on the front end JavaScript, and that's been very, very good. And then on the data side, we write everything to Mongo, and then we also intercept our topics. So we're doing streaming, and we're intercepting our Kafka topics and writing directly out to a Snowflake, our data warehouse. So we have Mongo, we have data warehouse in Snowflake, we have Looker on top of Snowflake, and then we've got Postgres for the admin type relational data to drive the system.
And were those decisions all made sort of in your 3-day retreat?
The only ones that weren't were things that we just didn't need to figure out. Yeah, which were to go with Snowflake later. It was probably a year later or 9 months later. And then Looker was about 9 months later. as well.
So I'm interested in this retreat approach. So instinctively or from your experience, you knew that if you were going to do a re-engineering, you would have to get everyone's buy-in. And the best way to do that is to give them a sense of ownership in that decision making.
That's right. We ran a 3-day retreat, and we had all of it wasn't just the senior team. It was literally everybody who was going to work on the product. So we had about 20 people there. We held it over in Coronado, and just made sure that I was trying to understand at the time, right? Who were these people? What are their
Because you were new to the
background? I was new
company.
to the company, right? So I didn't know everybody's abilities or where they really were passionate. So we ran a lot of sessions around designing the product, and we just took over the windows of a conference room that looked over the bay and started writing on the windows for 3 days. And so you could, literally see, and we were doing a domain-based analysis of the project and connecting the domains, and then identifying all of the use cases within the domains, and then all the data sets. And at the end, we had nice clusters of functionality that we needed to go work on.
Was the CEO there as well?
He checked in on us, like usually, around 5:00, and just got a readout from everybody. And so I tried to do as little speaking as possible. I tried to figure out, who are the leaders, who are really going to become owners, and identify, the folks that I think could, either take technical leads or leads from a standpoint of, driving the project, personally or interpersonally.
So CEO/CTO comes to you and says, listen, we've hit the ceiling of our current product. As far as the code base, the dev, everyone wants to start calling it the legacy system. We need to we often hear about re-engineer the product. We hear about rebuilding the plane in flight, when you hear that, when someone comes to you for that kind of advice, what comes up for you? Like, where do you take them? What advice do you have for them?
Well, the biggest thing I think is to get an admission of where you are as fast as possible and buy-in, I think, with the CEO of what it's going to take. You can think that you're going, your platform, or you're going to extend it out as far as possible, and you're going to keep running on that, or the idea of changing the tires on the bus while you're going down the road come to mind. And I've done this 3 times in my career, or maybe 4, where we've stepped in, actually 4 for sure. This is the 4th, where I've stepped into a major platform and I was brought in at the time to replace it. And I think after the 4th time, I think the things I've learned in doing that, because I guess I'm getting okay at it, is I think the strategy of forklifting out and starting over is the right strategy, especially depending on the age of the platform. This technology just moves so fast, and we've had these just amazing transitions of back in the day when we started the different architectures, and we back when we were just starting to use go off premise to data centers, and then finally the cloud opened up, and now it's becoming serverless. So at least 3 major transitions of just fundamental hardware and physical things going on, and the serverless things just starting right now. And just that alone, you see the savings, right? And so limping along or saying we're going to start retrofitting this other thing, I think I've never seen that as a great strategy, but obviously getting the business people to understand that has to happen, and hey, we've got to go spend a bunch of money. We have to pause the maintenance on this. We have to tell customers that the new platform is going to come out, is something that the whole organization has to be bought in. And then I think you can move forward, but you've got to get marketing and sales and everybody to provide cover, because they have to be able to work with customers and say, here's the strategy. It's very hard if you don't have everybody bought in. And
Yes.
Then you're just fighting.
So when you say forklifting out, what do you mean?
Well, if you're going to do a massive transition from an old platform to a new platform, whether that's in the SaaS space or whether that's in the shipped software delivery space, either way, and since a lot of things are moving to SaaS, that does change a little bit of the dimension, maybe with microservices, maybe that's a little bit more modular, right? I can go with each service, each module becomes a service. I might be able to only forklift a service at a time, but when the whole data model's changed, when the databases have changed, when the networking architecture has changed, when everything has changed, when the front end technology has changed, there's no real great way to merge an old platform and a new platform and have them sort of symbiotically work together. And you're forklifting out the old and coming up with a way to put customers on the new, right? And that's a big transition. So we did have the luxury in this case of greenfield development, knowing that we had a solid platform. We knew what it did as a prototype that was very successful. So we had learned a lot of lessons. Now we just wanted to make it better, but it was going to be a forklift out.
So how long did it take for you to get from when you joined to being able to forklift out?
It took 12 months.
And during that 12 months, you were still signing up people on the old system?
Very slowly. Most of sales did slow down. We were signing up new advertisers, but not new publishers, because new publishers is what was more challenging in the non-multi-tenant environment.
And okay, so you had this problem where it wasn't multi-tenanted, so you were literally deploying a code base for each new publisher.
Right.
So, so did you switch it off and switch the new system on like overnight kind of thing then?
We left the old system actually stayed on, and we left old customers there, and we brought new customers onto the new system. So that was an elegant way to not put at risk old customers and have new customers start to prove the system.
And have all the old customers been transitioned to the new platform already?
We have we have everybody now rolling on the new platform. So yeah, huge savings, right? 10x savings.
That's awesome.
And we're seeing a 20% improvement in revenue because of the algorithm changes that we're testing.
Yeah, I think that's one of those deal breakers in a sense when you have to ask yourself, should I re-platform or not? And that is my current platform preventing me from building new features or innovating in a way that pushes the company forward?
And I think that's always going to be the case in old legacy tech. Now, not all technology, right, is driving revenue. In our case, it is. Sometimes it's a supporting platform or a supporting system, so it's much harder to justify, the reinvention of that tech. It just works, and it might be clunky, it might be hard to find developers for it, but it's a harder justification than a platform that is the core money-making institution.
How much of your challenges are based on the fact that you have a browsers, like you're installing a snippet of code into all these, I'm guessing hundreds, if not thousands of publisher websites?
It hasn't been horrible. I mean, we try to water that down so simply, and what we're trying to do is so simple
that you don't want that piece of code to ever have to change.
Yeah,
kind of like Google's analytics code. It's just a simple.
Right. It's very, very good analogy. So it would be, the other, our competitor, some competitor ad networks and whatnot out there. What we actually, the code that goes on the site is actually quite simple. We do a lot of back end stuff to push up, but the code on the site has to be simple for exactly that reason. Obviously it has to be responsive and all that, but at the same time, we're not trying to do a lot of crazy things. We're asking a question. We're putting up some options to answer the question, radio buttons or whatnot, a text field, mostly radio buttons though. and we're going to provide a creative in a a JPEG to push with a question underneath it saying, "Do you like this offer? Here's the advertisement." So that context is a pretty simple serving of an ad.
So, Matt, getting to the CTO position at Zeeto, you are a country boy, right?
I did. I grew up in beautiful Montana and still consider myself a Montanan.
Did you hunt rabbits?
I did hunt a lot of rabbits as a kid.
And did you skin them and eat them?
Did a lot of skinning, not a lot of eating though. I had a big German Shepherd that loved to eat my rabbits, but it was a little boy as an 8-year-old with a BB gun and a pellet gun, and then eventually a 22, running around shooting rabbits for my pups.
And then how did you go from that to loving tech and your career in technology?
Well,
because I think in the parallel universe, you're riding a horse right now over a hill, right?
I always am. It seems like I grew up with horses. I grew up literally in the backcountry of some of the most beautiful places you can think on the planet. My family, we spent several weeks every summer with a pack string in the backcountry of Yellowstone at 10,000 feet up in one of the largest plateaus in North America, or alpine plateaus. Just fly fishing, going from lake to lake. 8 horses, four family members. Everybody had a pack horse, and we would spend weeks up there. And it was just the most incredible childhood experience that you can imagine. I worked on a next door neighbor ranch. Got up in the morning in the summer, jumped on my horse, rode 4 miles to my job, tied up my horse, or put him in the corral. And did the ranch jobs and irrigation jobs, and would ride home in the evening. If I wanted to play baseball in town, which was 3 miles the other direction, I had to jump on my horse and twice a week and ride down to baseball practice, tie my horse up at the corral. So I spent countless hours horseback, breaking horses and riding and doing things that we do in Montana. So,
and then how did you enter sort of the tech space?
So I was
either going to ask that question or how do you break in a horse?
I love the horse whisperer method. So I'm a big fan of a guy named Ray Hunt, and Ray Hunt was a magician.
Isn't he the original horse whisperer?
He was, in my opinion, and so look that up.
Does that entail whispering at a horse?
You can make horses have your respect. It is very quiet. It's a very quiet thing. It's not a. The reason it's called whispering is there's not a lot of commotion and there's not a lot of pain and showboating. It's a very quiet.
Why do
respect.
Humans love horses so much?
I don't. Well, I have a lot of friends who have horses, even here in San Diego, and people do fall in love with horses. I think it's those, that super intelligent eye looking at you and thinking about things, and they really do look out for you when you're riding them.
I wonder. I mean, I was actually thinking about this yesterday because someone posted a picture of a horse on its side, having stuck its neck out to chew the green grass right outside the camp. And I was looking at this little video intently, and I asked myself the same question: why do people love horses? And then I felt like, is it possible that because they have such beautiful teeth?
I mean, I as a kid,
the teeth are beautiful.
They're beautiful. They're a little intimidating to a lot of people. But I used to go out in the corral, and the favorite thing to do when you're 9 or 10 years old, when you have 8 horses out there in a pasture, is when they lie down and they're napping, to just go lie down on top of them and take a nap. And that's a pretty fun bonding experience. I think dogs and horses are very alike. But I grew up in a really, really interesting little town, and we had a wonderful education, starting in grade school with a math teacher who taught in the high school. I mean, my little town is probably 300 people, and we had a math professor, Bob Hull, who ran the math for junior high school, junior high, and then touched into the grade school. And at the grade school level, we were encouraged to go on think they called it math counts back then. And you would get on a bus on a Saturday and you would go compete with other schools, just like going to a basketball game. And so he built a math team, and we did really well. We were one of the best math teams in the state. And it was, the confidence to go put yourself out there on sort of, every couple of weeks and study and get ready for the meet and then go to a big high school, and you're kind of intimidating, but.
And are you solving math puzzles as part of the?
Yeah, it's
equations.
Equations. Some of it would be just numerical analysis. There were usually 5 or 6 different tests you would take in a day. Some of them, so algebra, numeric analysis, trigonometry, depending on where your grade level was. And we were doing all of it by the time we were in junior high. And so he just built a lot of confidence, and he was a guy that he could have done anything, and he chose his life's calling was to come home from university and learning math and come home to his hometown and teach math, and he was great at it. So I give all credit to that experience and that man for making me then go and major in math in college and get a degree in math and statistical analysis, and felt that I just that was just normal. And so there's tremendous amount of just ability to not be afraid of technical things.
What is what does math give you? I feel like a lot of people who have computer science degrees, many people who code have this sort of fascination with math.
Well, math is a language. And I think it's very important to think of it as a language with verbs and nouns and certainly techniques and composition and telling a story. And I think as you get into the higher order things, to be able to prove things with math and to predict things with math. And the first time you do that, I think it's fascinating to say, I wonder how fast that thing is going to be. I wonder how big that will be. I wonder if we will meet at the same time. And you do that in some engineering problem and you predict what's going to happen. And that I was working on, I thought was just came to mind where that one of those things that happened to me years ago. I was working on a program for downloading software to do software changes to IoT devices. And it was a one-way communication to devices. And we had to predict how often we were going to need to retry packets of software. And it was just a beautiful mathematical model and a statistical approach to, are they listening? Are they not listening? What are the likelihood of them getting these packets? And so we built a statistical model, and then we implemented the process on the RF to talk to things over the radio. We were very close. So we knew how much bandwidth we then would need to use to download new software to an IoT device, across literally 100 kilohertz connection. So, that's just an amazing capability that crosses not just software development. And, it gets a little more, I think it's the bridge between computer science and electrical engineering in some ways for me.
It's also what I find interesting, the wealth of math and equations and algorithms that exist that we can tap into to do calculations, but we all think it's almost like it's not part of our toolkit as modern developers. You just think you have to bulldoze your way through coding, whatever, it's a lot about modeling your data, defining your classes and methods and all that. But oftentimes I think that there's just this wealth of algorithms out there that solve almost every problem under the sun, but we aren't really encouraging people to make that part of their toolkit.
Well, you look at what advanced math is bringing to us right now. Number one, I would just think of encryption.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we just pull encryption out of a library as from a computer science standpoint and use it, and don't think about the math behind it, and the evolving math around it, and every time it gets cracked, the more math that has to happen, right? Every 20 years, it seems like there has to be an advance. Then the other thing, blockchain. Blockchain is not first as computer science. Blockchain is a mathematical proof, and that's pretty fascinating, right? And now we're taking it and using it for all sorts of things, including creating big financial bubbles. But
I knew at some point you would mention.
I had to start, right?
Yeah, I had a great conversation with someone about white papers and computer science white papers, and we were sort of reminiscing on the fact that so many of these, what we think are modern concepts, were written about 30, 40 years ago.
They really were. There's so much math that was done that just never, I think, in many ways, was ahead of its time, if you will. It certainly was ahead of its engineering use. And I think a lot of that could be reviewed and found to have huge, huge impact if we really thought about it. For me, my background, not only in math, but statistics, has always been a driver in the businesses that I chose to join. Once I could start making choices about, I really want to work for them, or I really want to work for them, and not just needing a job, but once I, got to a level. And so when I got into the utility industry years ago, it was about, wow, look, I have all this data, all this IoT data. How can I help utilities find fraud, help utilities with better usage of electric, water, gas? For me, it was just a fascinating, data science problem. And my choice to join Zeeto was not just about, this platform that needed to get developed. It was, oh my gosh, all of this data, and how do we make good, machine learning decisions with this data and find insight? And so a lot of what we're doing now is finally, now that we have a platform and we're analyzing, just terabytes and petabytes of data and decisions we make. Did we make the right decision? We could have shown this advertisement and it had this potential opportunity, but we didn't show these other 100 or 1,000. Why not? And did we make the right decision at that point in time? And so we capture everything about all of our decisions.
The nice thing about your platform is you kind of get that user validation at the end in terms of, did my questions lead to an ad that was clicked on?
Mm-hmm.
You kind of have that truth.
We do. And we also have, did they stay engaged to maybe even answer another question? So we can look at drop-offs. We can look at the ads. There's lots of variables there.
So, just as we wrap up, I did want to talk about a feat that you accomplished. And that was, I talked to your CEO a couple months ago, and he was rejoicing over how pre-Matt Ferguson, he kind of never knew what his team was working on, how long it would take to get things done. And you somehow brought in a methodology that not only provided him with insight and transparency into what you're developing, but also was able to greatly simplify where your CEO would put their focus on what needs to be worked on and when it will be delivered. So that's sort of a massive cultural change that you not only instituted at the dev level and engineering level, I'm sure guided some of your hiring decisions, but also at the C level, being able to introduce that culture. Can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe as people are listening, so sort of some advice or some nuggets out there that you want to talk about?
Well, I know that what we did was challenging and probably, one of the, I think, the biggest achievements I've done in my career with it, because it was very much a social engineering challenge, not just a software engineering challenge, and those are difficult. across. It's not just about saying, hey, for this software engineering team, we're going to do something different, but in literally every aspect of the business, we're going to rethink how we approach the business. So we just to I'll cut it short and then I'll start filling in the backstory. We implemented a technique called mob programming. I'll state again, it's not just about programmers. I think if you really, really want to make it successful, you extend out the whole philosophy to the whole company. And that's when it became transformational for us. So you mentioned our CEO and the visibility and the transparency it offered. And this is, I think, what clicked in my head when I came to 7 CTOs event. And I saw Woody Zuhl presenting on it, who's the great practitioner of Agile, Lean, and Mob. And for me, I was at that time in that place, I guess almost a year ago, considering, hey, what are our problems? And I think 7 CTOs has been just wonderful in its all of its events and quarterly meetings and get-togethers in talking about a problem that we can take back to our business and hopefully have impactful change. And mob programming for me and what Woody was describing just clicked. I could see, sometimes you can have a vision, like when I'm working in the shop and I'm building something and I'm the master of X and Y, Z tools, and I'm a master, sometimes when I don't cut fingers off or whatever, the wood and how I think the wood can work and how all of it will work. And in my mind, I could see the individuals in my head interacting with what Woody was saying. I could see our CEO interacting, and I could see our product management group interacting, and I could see where I had been envisioning myself in the middle of it all. And I was seeing, and I could just see it literally like
so you're in your mind's eye.
In my mind's eye, I could see the system we had, which was a wonderful, Scrum-based approach to agile software development. And I could see, but I didn't know how to get any better. And it was pretty good. It was as good as I've done. And then I could just see the same people working in this other environment. And it was just like there was harmonics and you heard the noise and there were angels and it was beautiful. So, it was inspiring. And the being able to just leave that meeting and say, I'm going to try it. And so I literally brought some people to 2 of my thought leaders in the business, the engineers that people respect and had been there from the start, said, hey, let's give this a shot. Now come back to a workshop with me. Let's learn this together. Let's talk about it some more and see what you think. So once again, it can't be just crazy Matt. It needs to be a team making this decision. But when I went back and we started, working on the team of our CEO, our chief product officer, and everyone about, hey, these are the things that we're struggling with, right? Do we want to keep struggling with these things? And what are we going to do about them? It's like, no, we don't, we do want to fix them. These are frustrating.
And struggling, like 2 or 3 of the, what is it like insight, transparency, productivity, or what?
There's the when is it going to be done?
Yeah.
What are we going to work on? All of those things. Classic prioritization and time. And then just where are we? So we wanted to get better at that. And I think the key was, there's no way to get better at that, without doing something completely different. We were as good as I've ever seen anybody really get, but I just don't feel that I felt that we could do better. So at the end of the day, we bought into it as a management team first. And we said, and then it became how are we going to get the engineers to embrace and to support this effort? Because it is dramatically different. Mob programming is forming small 3 to 4 person teams with 1 keyboard for the whole day, alternating who's at the keyboard. Person at the keyboard is not the person that's just writing code. They're there to take the ideas of the other people, the navigators, and do what they say. And so it's a very, it creates this communication level that is hyper communication, and communication with product becomes hyper. And our CEO can now walk amongst the engineering team and just ask, "Hey, how you doing? And what are you working on?" And know instantly. Number one, we're only working on, instead of 30 things and 30 engineers trying to, on many tasks that are very hard to measure where anyone is at, we're now working on 6 things on 6 teams. And so it's very easy to keep in anybody's head from day to day. What's going on? Where are we at? And just that simplified the whole business dramatically for him. It re-engaged him with the engineers to drive, I think, a trust and an accountability. And I'll re-say, we one of the big things we wanted to do with this was engineering accountability. And it increased our engineers' accountability because we immediately changed our handshake with product management. And now product management was starting a task with us as a collaborator instead of a deliverer of
contender.
a contender. Yeah, there was no contentious relationship, and not that there needed to be, but instead of handing a pile of requirements over, saying we've already thought this all out, just get this done.
You're spending so much time on that interface, and then with Mob, it just disappears.
It disappears. It's gone because we start a new task with a collaboration with product to say, what are you trying to achieve? Okay, at the end of the day or in 3 days, we think we'll have something to show you, and then you can tell us what you need to, what more we should do. And that can go on iteratively for a couple of weeks until everybody says, yeah, I think that's pretty good. So it has broken down everything. We've moved to we're able to run the company with less management. We're able to, the individual mob teams are almost self-managing. The end of day retros takes care of so much of getting people to work together and what do we do well. And the philosophy is fascinating. As far as tips and tricks, number one, I think so many of these sort of processes or methodologies are trying to grassroots up. And I think getting a management team to understand how important it is for them to drive is super important, because I think to get the highest amount of benefit, getting product, getting your CEO, the whole roadmap formed around what's possible is key, and eliminate all these friction points and
as opposed to having a constant conversation where management wants something done, can't tell how long it's going to take or if it can be done. So you kind of have the tail wagging the dog.
Absolutely. In many situations, right, as a leader, as a technology leader, your CEO is asking you as the interface to technology, when's that going to get done? Or they're asking product as well, when's that going to get done? And they're triangulating the two answers. And
so
in this case, we've eliminated that, because if our CEO really wants to know, he can just walk over to one of the teams.
Can you imagine? I was just thinking about, I had this conversation with someone recently where they were, can you imagine a culture where the CEO can actually stand over the shoulder of a dev and say, hey, so how are you doing? In scenario A, tradition, that freaks you out, right? I mean, the CEO, it's almost like, please don't let the CEO ever stand over my shoulder. But in the environment you're describing, that's completely normal and completely not intimidating.
And before before this process, that would have been disruptive. It would have been, where is he going to direct me to? I need one of, either product or my CTO to kind of buffer. And now it's, before I came here to talk with you today, we went around to all the teams, and I stood in the background, and our CEO asked 6 teams, hey, what's going on? How you doing? And he knew exactly what each of them was working on, and he was able to.
That is a fascinating approach. So do you think that the CTO role is necessary?
It's vital, but it's not the role I think some people think it is. In my opinion, it's a coaching role, it's a mentoring role, and sometimes that's not always about technology.
Absolutely.
Right? I hire great programmers, I hope, every day to do great technical implementation. I really want my job to break down the other barriers, which are about communication, about driving to architecture, to thinking strategically. And that's very hard to do if I'm worrying about the nuts and bolts of how a particular class is being written.
And that frees you up then for the code that you do write or tinker around with to be more exploratory, prototype-ish, future focused, as opposed to trying to get your hands into production code.
That's right. I mean, the projects that I take on now are much more exploratory, or hey, we've never used this type of technology before. Let me do the hello world and see if I can get that that juxtaposition in my head of how this fits together, or just explore vendors.
Yeah, I think that is such a valuable role that a CTO can play, and something I think that maybe we underestimate, which is our teams want to be autonomous for the most part when it comes to day-to-day and maybe the next couple months. But I think that there's an intimidation when they are autonomous for the next 12 months. And so I think we actually provide a great service as CTOs to say, you know what, you have autonomy for now, do what you need to do, but don't worry, I know where we're going, and this is I'm going ahead, and I'm sort of
I mean, that's, I think, where we should be spending our time. I fundamentally believe we should be explorers, and we should be leading the ship and not rowing. That has to be, I think, the right use of our time. It's the best use of our time. Some people are going to be better at different aspects of that. It's allowed me this year, I think, going to mob programming, if it's freed up a ton of time for me to do that. It's freed up a ton of time for me to enjoy doing those little projects again and feeling very creative about those projects. And then immediately bringing on even junior devs to be executors in some of that new technology. We've embraced some new serverless technology this year that, we didn't embrace with the redesign of the platform. But around the margins, we've been able to get junior devs and small projects moving.
To do 10 more shows on this. I mean, that is gorgeous. Matt Ferguson, any questions for me, or are we good?
Jeez, you're going to open that door? This has been great. I really appreciate everything you've done for us and for 7 CTOs. And like I said, we're just helping us transform the business this year through the outreach of the forums.
Oh, dude. As long as my share certificate shows up in the mail, I'm still waiting for Stefan to send me my stock certificate. But no, I'm loving the transformation, and you're just watching your journey. Very quickly, what are you reading right now?
It's the Jeff Bezos biography, which I'm fascinated with, his approach to something and the company and where it came from. It's actually the roots of it that I find most fascinating. It's like, why did he start thinking that way? Interesting stuff.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Cheers.
Thank you.
Have you chatted with a CTO lately? Hi, thank you for listening to the CTO Studio. If you don't mind, take a quick second and please rate and review the show. It helps us a lot. Go to the ctostudio.com for more information on what we're doing at 7 CTOs. We also have a video or two for you that could be a helpful resource for you as you're managing your company. So thank you for listening.